the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization. It's a huge deal and a major victory for the United States. Keep in mind, Soleimani and his Iranian-backed forces were responsible for killing over 600 American troops during the Iraq War. That's 17% of the deaths of all U.S. soldiers during the Iraq War. So this is, for some people, for some lawmakers, for some families, this is a long time coming, and they think justice has been served.
Fox's Lucas Tomlinson, Iran's supreme leader, warns a harsh retaliation is waiting. The Trump administration is taking on the e-cigarette industry in response to a spike in vape-related lung illnesses.
The Food and Drug Administration says ever since vaping devices have been around, they've not enforced a law requiring all products get federal authorization. And so now they'll start going after makers of vapes.
We will be enforcing the law by prioritizing the products that most appeal to kids. We will continue to monitor use of e-cigarette products by youth and take additional action as necessary.
Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar says that means flavored vapes aside from tobacco and menthol flavors.
Fox's Eben Brown. Former Housing Secretary Julian Castro is ending his run for president. Democratic 2020 contender Andrew Yang.
I admire Julian and the way he conducted his campaign throughout. I'm very sad to see him go.
Meanwhile, Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson laid off her entire campaign staff, but she says she's not getting out of the race. America's listening to Fox News.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Calaguan Hafa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Yikes, are those Christmas bills coming in already? Those high-interest credit cards at 16, 18, even 24%? Well, we have a New Year's solution for you. A Bank Pacific personal loan with rates as low as 4.65% to pay off those expensive credit cards. It's easy, it's fast, and it's as low as 4.65% APR.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal credit opportunity lender as low as 4.65%. Conditions apply.
Another state legalizes pot sales and demand is high.
2 days into legal marijuana sales in Illinois, and with 10 states already selling, there is more demand than there is supply. People are still waiting in line to buy edibles and weed. One marijuana business consultant says medical cannabis sales serve some 80,000 people in the land of Lincoln. Now that pot is legal, sales are open to everyone of age in a state of 12 million. Many pot dispensaries closed earlier, limited sales. The street-level pot dealers not going away. Untaxed and unregulated, illegal weed is considerably cheaper. In Chicago, Mike Tobin, Fox News.
California prosecutors say 7 gang members are charged in the shooting deaths of 4 men at a backyard party. The victims were killed in November. Police say the suspects are members of the Mongolian Boys Society and that the shooting was intended as retaliation for the death of another gang member. A Wisconsin teacher learns a lesson in humility after using a public park as a bathroom.
Authorities cited Jeffrey S. Churchwell in October for defecating in Natureland Park in Whitewater, Wisconsin, but it wasn't a one-time thing. Sheriff's Office reports obtained by the Janesville Gazette indicate Churchwell did his business outside of and on a park building for 2 years, sometimes several times per day. A Public Works employee showed deputies trail photos of a man defecating along with photos of a car and partial license plate, which was used to identify Churchwell. Authorities caught the retiring teacher in the park later that day before he could mark his territory. Churchwell apologized in an email to the deputy who arrested him, adding he allowed his thrill-seeking, self-indulgent pride and ego both get the best of him. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
A 32-year-old prisoner was stabbed to death Thursday at the Mississippi State Penitentiary. The man's death is the 4th related to disturbances in the state's prisons over the past week. Sunday, there was a major disturbance at the South Mississippi Correctional Institution, leaving 1 inmate dead and 2 others hurt. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Live the balanced lifestyle. Take Care Insurance offers proven wellness and fitness programs to encourage individuals and families to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle through preventative care, being active, eating right, relaxing and unwinding, and being socially connected. They have the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs for all ages. Join the movement. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram or visit takecareasia.com to learn more.
Chili's 2 for $25 is back. Start with an appetizer to share. Then choose 2 entrees like our mouth-watering Old Timer with cheeseburger or the Cajun chicken pasta, grilled chicken with penne and Alfredo sauce, and chili spices. Feeling extra? Upgrade to a personal fajita or our famous half-rack ribs. Bring a friend or a date to Chili's and get 2 entrees for $25. Located on the 2nd floor of Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's. More life happens here.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's how we start Tall Tales every year. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Every day, every year.
Every year. Every year the Tall Tales has been on, we've started it that way. And after we pay our obeisance to the Second Amendment, we go from there to where, Real Joe Cruz?
Zemi sir.
Zemi. So I asked you that question knowing for sure that you had the answer. Want to know why? Because you've got seniority on the job.
Oh, I do?
Yeah, you've been on this job all year.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. You've been the producer for Tall Tales all year. And you haven't come even close to screwing up.
I try, sir.
Even once, in this whole year. Very good, Real Joe Cruz.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so we start out with, as we ended the year, with the Daily News running an editorial from somewhere else. And this time it's called, Is Hindsight Truly 2020? And then it says, Can Dems recover from wipeouts of 2010? Now, I read the whole thing. And if you have an overpowering desire to read it, go right ahead. You'll find it in the Daily News. And so that you won't be confused, you may think that you've picked up the wrong paper by mistake. It reads like a house organ for the Democrat Party, what the Democrats did and what they ought to do. It doesn't read like a newspaper. It's kind of like, Dear Democrats, here's your newsletter for this week. Of course, it is USA Today, so why should I be surprised? Yeah, and then it's kind of a grim day for editorials today. The Post, Guam consumers need to stay vigilant to ensure food safety. And it talks about, don't eat uncooked meats and stuff like that. It's a classic case of something that ought to run as a public service announcement. But it has been recast into an editorial, and it really has no editorial comment at all. So I'm just going to take my blue pencil here today, and I'm just going to put a check mark on the Post editorial showing that I saw it, but it doesn't measure up. A grim day for Zemi Ikutni. No real editorials for me to sink my teeth into. So from there we go to the card, and let's see. Yeah, the card. I start out with Christmas torts, And then I go to the left versus the unborn. And I'm happy to say that this is a place where Guam is really going to shine worldwide. And then we've got Lu versus the Manamku, a holdover with a new addition. CLTC versus Chamorros, another holdover. The IRS versus you. So I'm going to be talking about tax liability and the IRS's push to collect certain kinds of taxes. So if for no other reason, you probably want to listen to this so as to protect yourself. And of course, that's what we're always, that's always what we're concerned with here on Tall Tales, is people being able to protect themselves. The real Joe Cruz will tell you that just how does that go? Constitution and how does that one go, real Joe Cruz?
Oh, while the Constitution may set forth rights and liberties, it's the people. Excuse me. It's the people that have the right and duty to be good citizens.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something.
An active and informed citizenship, right?
Let me get the right one.
Yeah. I spoke too soon about, having a job all year and you hadn't screwed up.
While a Constitution may set forth the rights and liberties, only citizens can maintain and guarantee those freedoms. Active and informed citizenship is not just a right, it's a duty.
Yeah, so
don't forget it, Bob.
Okay, so along the lines of protection here, we want you to be able to carry a firearm if you so desire, and we want you to make sure that you're helping and protecting your own rights and liberties here by being active and informed citizens. And of course, you're doing the informed part of it by listening to Tall Tales. But as a matter of protection, you probably want to stay tuned to the cards if we get down to the IRS versus you. And then I've got Nelson versus Blas, the continuing saga of the mayor of Doña, and Antonio Gramsci versus y'all, which we started on a couple times but never finished. So let's start out with Christmas Torts of 2010, a listing of holiday mishaps and madness. And let's see, every man who made turkey and goose in traditional Christmas meals, even the man who made turkey and goose into traditional Christmas meals showed how the most carefully planned holiday meals can go awry. A letter from celebrated author Charles Dickens. Now, we remember him at Christmas time because of A Christmas Carol. Tiny Tim.
The movie, yeah.
Yeah, the movie.
That's what I know of.
Charles Dickens wrote the movie. Yeah. Very good, real Joe Cruz. You are a man of your times, aren't you? Oh, yeah, the movie. A letter from celebrated author Charles Dickens, who brought the birds to the centerpiece of our dinners in his famous Christmas stories, explained how he did not get the turkey dinner he planned in 1869. That was before he made the movie, real Joe Cruz. The 30-pound turkey he ordered for Christmas meal burned to a crisp in a fire on the Great Western Railroad. Dickens may have been spared a worse fate, however, since food poisoning also is a common Christmas tort. This year, the Philippines is grappling with hundreds of people poisoned by a traditional wine drink made from coconut sap. The Lamanok ingestion included free wine supplied by the government. So, have you ever heard of a wine made from coconut sap? Real Joe Cruz?
It's called tuba?
It sure is.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll come back to the Christmas torch on Monday. And next item on the card, abortion. The left versus the unborn. Abortion was the leading cause of death in 2019, with a toll in the millions. While the media The media, activists, and politicians have gone into overdrive when it came to highlighting deaths by things like firearms and white supremacy in 2019. The real king of the killers was the abortion industry, and not by a small margin either. According to LifeSite News, the number of babies aborted last year was a shocking 42.3 million, outnumbering the other top causes of death combined. A quote, a heartbreaking reminder about the prevalence of abortion. Statistics compiled by Worldometers indicate that there were 42.3 million abortions worldwide in 2019. The independent site collects data from governments and other reputable organizations and then reports the data along with estimates and projections based on those numbers. When contrasting the abortion numbers to other causes of death, including cancer, HIV, AIDS, traffic accidents, and suicide, abortions far outnumber every other cause. By contrast, 8.2 million people died from cancer in 2019, 5 million from smoking, 13 million from disease, and 1.7 million died of AIDS. Death by malaria and alcohol are also recorded. This may be a tough number to wrap one's head around, as every single one of those is a human life lost. It's even tougher to wrap your head around the idea that this was the life of an innocent child taken with the consent of the mother, possibly even the father. It's also sobering to think that the amount of death outweighs almost every major war, with the exception of World War II at 69 million. Many of the deaths in those wars couldn't match up to the 2019 abortions deaths combined. LifeSite News states that an estimated 61 million abortions of unborn children have taken place in the United States since Roe versus Wade went into action. On 2017, on its 101st birthday, Planned Parenthood has confirmed 7 million deaths just on its own since its inception. This is an atrocity of unbelievable proportions, and one that sadly in our culture goes completely unreported and unspoken of. In various ways, it goes almost celebrated by the mainstream media. Well, of course, here on Guam, we have the first openly pro-abortion governor of Guam. And I said when I started this that for once, I shouldn't say for once, I said that Guam comes out looking pretty good on this. Because although there were, 42.3 million worldwide, for abortions worldwide, none of them came from Guam. There was not a reported abortion last year. Let's have a round of applause there, Real Joe Cruz. Yeah. Not a reported abortion last year. But of course, our first openly pro-abortion governor is unhappy about this. She treated it as an emergency and detailed Jane Flores to go out and find an abortionist to come. We can't have that. We can't be so far behind the rest of the world. 0 abortions. But I'd say that's really, really good news, and I hope we can keep it up. And as far as Jane Flores bringing an abortionist to Guam, I will borrow that line from Treasurer Sierra Madre that I like so much. We don't need no stinking abortionist. Okay, next item on the card is Lou versus the Manamku. And this goes back to this war claims initiative. And we've talked about so much that Lou likes to talk about. And it's actually a cruel hoax being played on our old folks, our manamku. No, I'm kudzo lo. I'm not I'm not being fooled here by this whole charade. And once again, so that everyone understands what's going on, Madeline flubbed the war claims bill because she left language out of her bill that was passed that allowed the Treasury Department to actually cut checks. She left office without saying boo about it. Mike San Nicolas, who beat her, didn't find out about it until he took office. So after he took office, he introduced Bill 1365, which fixes the problem. The language in that bill allows the Department of Treasury, the United States government, to actually pay people. That wasn't good enough for Lou and Tina. That Tina introduced Bill 181, which Lou championed, to pay war claims here. And the idea was that the war claims would be paid from local funds. The claimants would assign their right to the federal payment over to the government of Guam, and then the Treasury would reimburse the government of Guam for those payments. Well, Bill 181 is as poor a bill as one would ever see, because it talks in terms of a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Treasury without even indicating what the terms should be. But when you scrape all the paint and varnish off of it, if Treasury doesn't agree to anything, then we're going to wind up paying the money paying the claims out of our own pocket, and the claimants would be free to cash the checks that they ultimately get from Treasury. That is, if San Nicolas's bill ever passes. Now, there's a story in today's Post that kind of picks up on this. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero said reparations payments to war survivors could begin by the end of the month. Following a press conference Thursday where she signed a bill for police reservists' pay increases, she said she expects to sign the war reparations bill today, which is the last day she has to take action on the bill. Everybody knows that my aggressive target is the end of January. So everyone on our team is working very hard to make that happen. Like the day before Christmas, man, if you drove past Adelup, you could just see steam coming out of the rafters. They're working so, oh no, wait a minute. The government closed on the day before Christmas. So I wonder, do you think they were working hard on the day before Christmas, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm sure they were, sir.
Yeah, we just couldn't tell because they weren't in their offices.
True.
Yeah. Okay. Speaker Tina Muñoz Barnes, Senator Will Castro, and Amanda Shelton, working with the governor, introduced Bill 181 last year with the goal of paying war reparations by July 21, 2019. We remember that. We hope to have checks in people's hands by Liberation Day. And of course, every time we talk about this, we have to go through the same rituals. We have to talk about the suffering that the survivors went through during the Japanese occupation. And we have to talk about the fact that those people who survived the Japanese occupation are dying. Well, you don't have to be an actuarial ace to figure out that people who were still alive in 1944 are getting to the end of their lifespan. People die. But we have to continually dwell on this. We have to hurry because these people are dying. And they suffered so much, as though we don't already know that. We're painfully aware of that already. But of course, this is the kind of demagoguery that allows Tina and Will and Amanda and Lou to get out there and demagogue this and virtue signal. Oh, you know, we're for the Manamco. We want to get that money in your pocket. And then Lou goes on to say, we're in direct communication with the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and I'm pretty confident it will happen. In fact, I'm very confident that it's going to happen. That sure makes me feel good. The governor's confident. There are still a number of questions that haven't been answered regarding Bill 181, which will use local funds to pay war claims. This is in direct competition to the federal effort, H.R. 1365, which will use Section 30 money that the federal government pays to Guam every year. Now, here's the key sentence in this whole article. Payment of war reparations, according to the substitute version of Bill 181, is dependent on the agreement. So, as we sit here, San Nicolas's 1361 is not passed the Senate. And obviously it hasn't been signed by the president, so it's not law. So we should join Lou in being confident to think that Treasury Department officials are going to enter into a contingent agreement which says if Bill 1361 passes the Senate and if the president signs that into law, and if you pay out advance payments to claimants with adjudicated claims, then we'll reimburse you. I just can't see that. I'm not confident at all. In fact, my lack of confidence is overwhelming. I just can't see responsible government officials going through all of those ifs, especially when some technical genius at the Department of Treasury says, hey, I know this World War II Loyalty Act is the law, but we can't pay it out because there's missing language here. So these guys have a fine-tooth comb that they go through this stuff with. So as I see it, the only way that the government of Guam is going to be able to pay anybody anything is if 1365 passes the Senate and is signed into law by the president. Then, if the Treasury entered into an agreement, there would be money available to reimburse the government of Guam. But if 1365 doesn't become law, there is no money. And I advanced the hypothetical last week. If 1365 doesn't pass this year, when this Congress adjourns, it's dead. We got to start all over again. And to think that you could make book on what the Senate is going to do with respect to something like this, you're going to have to give me some really long odds before I'd plunk down $1 to bet on this one. To further complicate matters, San Nicolas, whose lane this project is actually in, has warned the legislature on more than one occasion. What you're doing may hamper efforts to get this bill passed. It may delay it. It may even be so disruptive as to cause the bill not to pass. Now let's speculate a little bit. How could that happen? Let's say that in the Senate, according to San Nicolas, it's on fast track in the Senate, which is something like the consent calendar in the House. So that means that when the bill comes to the floor, unless somebody objects, it will pass without debate, without the vote, etc. But let's say that there's one senator there who, for some reason, maybe it's a friend of John McCain, the late John McCain, or Senator Levin. You remember when Senator Levin and Senator Jim Webb were given a Class A ass-chewing by Judy Wanpat, and I think it was the Wanpat 6 at that time. Maybe somebody still harbors some ill will for us going back to those days and has communicated that to somebody in the Senate. So when it comes time for the fast track, One senator says, no, I'm not in favor of that. Just put it, let's put it on the regular calendar. If we get to it, we'll debate it and we'll see where it goes. Why run that risk when the only thing you could do is, if 181 works really, really well, the only thing you could do is after 1365 becomes law, you could start paying against adjudicate. Well, you have to first of all start collecting information from the survivors, from the claimants. You'd have to find out who actually filed a claim, and then you would have to have those people waive their right to or sign their right to any check that they would get on for that claim over to the government of Guam. Now, this is supposed to be better. This is supposed to be faster. I just can't see it, because if 1365 becomes law, then all of those adjudicated claims will be paid by the Treasury forthwith. And if you've ever gotten a check from the United States Treasury, you know it doesn't take them a year to issue a check. They're pretty good at that. So what is the reason behind 181? It doesn't make any sense. It has the potential to be injurious. So why are Tina and Castro and Shelton and Governor Leon Guerrero, why are they spending so much time on this? And this is where I got caught in a dilemma. I don't know if I should describe what they're doing as grandstanding or showboating. It actually is both. You know, they're playing to the nickel seats. They're playing on people's emotions, talking about how the greatest generation, they're dying every day, and they suffered so much. So we're going to work really, really hard to get them that money as fast as we can. Well, let's take a short break, and I'll come back and wrap this up.
The holidays are here and the shopping frenzy begins. Protect yourself with these safe shopping tips. Consider shopping only with retailers you trust, or do some research on other retailers you aren't familiar with before proceeding. Don't save your credit card information on retail websites, and never make payments when using public Wi-Fi. Switch to cellular data or wait until you get to a secure network to make your purchases. These safe holiday banking tips are brought to you by Bank of Guam, the People's Bank, member FDIC.
GRMC's Neuroscience and Neurology Department treats a wide spectrum of disorders associated with the nervous system, spine, and brain. Some of the more common disorders include seizures, epilepsy, dementia, sleep disorders, migraine, and stroke, which is one of the leading causes of death on Guam. GRMC's neuroscience team is equipped with the latest technology and the finest neurological doctors. To make an appointment, contact GRMC Specialty Clinics at 645-5500.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so why are they going through this exercise in demagoguery? You know, and as I pointed out, it's classic demagoguery. You know, people are dying. They suffered so much. We're trying as hard. We're working very hard to get this money into their hand. And either they know it's an exercise in futility, which is bad, or they don't know it's an exercise in futility, which is even worse, because they're not going to have any impact on this, but they do have the ability to stand out there and get the Madame Ko to say, hi, day. Say, look, this name, Malik, all nice. A judo no, he todu, Madame Ko, ne, salapin war claims. So, you know, it's working very well for them in that regard, because the media hasn't really blown the whistle on them yet. So that's why they're doing it. It's a way to engender a certain amount of affection to themselves by people who don't understand what they're doing. And I can understand people not being able to understand, because they've kind of concealed it. talking in terms of this memorandum of understanding and all of the fancy lingo, etc. But when you come right down to it, that's it. They don't want San Nicolas to take any more credit than they can possibly avoid. They want the credit for themselves. And even though what they're doing won't work, when the checks finally arrive, they're going to be able to say, we're so glad you got your checks. You know, we really worked really hard. We tried really hard to get you those checks sooner than what you got them. So remember that. We tried really hard because we're for the Manamco. And I think Sherry Iriarte has a comment here. I'm going to take a peek at Facebook. Sherry Iriarte, they want the rights signed to them, and if someone dies before payment, does Lou get to keep the federal money with no payment out to the deceased? Let's see. No. So I think what Sherry's saying is that someone who has an adjudicated claim takes the paper showing, and adjudicated claims means that the Federal War Claims Commission has received the papers, looked at it, and said, yes, you are entitled to $10,000 or you are entitled to $12,000. So the claimant takes that to the governor's office and signs a paper saying, I'm assigning the money from this claim to the government of Guam. And then the government of Guam says to Treasury, here, reimburse us because we already paid. And Sherry's question is, if some die before payment, does Lou keep the federal money? And the answer, yeah, the answer would be yes, because the money had already been paid out to the claimant before the rights were signed over. So just a completely unnecessary exercise and a far cry from providing basic services, basic governmental services in accordance with the rule of law in an effective and efficient manner, which is what we're all entitled to, and we oftentimes don't get. So that's Lou versus Manamco. Next item on the card is CLTC versus Chamorro. Let me see who wants to chime in here. Another Joe. Now, this is not you, real Joe Cruz.
No, sir.
This is another Joe.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, another Joe.
Hey, Uncle Bob.
How you doing?
Hey, so that caller said something interesting. The timing is kind of off, and unfortunately, we lose some of our loved ones before they can pay out or cut the check, even if the check is cut before they can cash it or pay it out. Then it's not going to go to the right place. So I'm just thinking maybe we should make sure that the speaker and the governor are truly working hard to make sure that does not happen, as some remedy for that.
Well, I would rather not have them working on this at all, because as I've explained at some length, there's nothing they can do to make the process any better than it is when 1365 passes. They are just confusing old folks and adding layers of complexity that really don't help anyone.
Well, what I mean, Bob, is if they do pass all this legislation here, the law of the legislature, that they're going to go pay out through the get reimbursed that way. So then, as you say, the money's already been transferred from Congress to government of Guam, and there it stays at the discretion of the office of the governor. I'm saying that if that be the case in any circumstance, maybe they should make sure that money is appropriately given to the family, or I don't know what the stipulations are.
Well, of course, nobody does. And that's another problem with this whole thing. You know, a well-drafted piece of legislation shouldn't require calls to Carlo Branch to find out what it means or how it's going to work. And that's what we have right now. But
I agree, Uncle Bob. But I also want to give credit to the previous caller that, yeah, definitely we don't want, it's not appropriate if the money was paid to our Malonco loved ones here on island, and somehow it's not getting to them. The office of the governor, they should not be doing whatever they want with that money.
Well, this is how I understand it's going to work. Another Joe. Let's say I'm the claimant, right? And I've got a piece of paper from the War Claims Commission. Dear Bob, your claim is granted for $12,000. So I take that claim to the governor's office and I say, here's my claim. And they say, fine, Bob, sign this form. And in the form, I say, I, Bob, hereby waive my claim against the Federal War Claims Commission for $12,000. I assign that claim to the government of Guam. And then somebody says, fine, here's your check, Bob. So when the check comes from the Treasury pays a check to the government of Guam to reimburse the money that was given to me. That's how they say it's going to work. I'm very doubtful that it's going to work that way, but that's how they say it.
Yeah, and we don't want to assume it's going to work because, you know, as they say about assuming, you make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
So thanks for your time, Uncle Bob, and I'll keep listening to your sage wisdom. Happy New Year.
Okay, thanks for calling another Joe. So so much for war claims. And then we go on to something else that I think is just as troubling for one part of the community, and that is the Chamorro Land Trust Commission's deal with the feds to solve that lawsuit. And I've spent some time on this before, but just to go through it for you again, there is a term sheet that's supposed to embody the terms of settlement that were agreed to. And this is what the key term says. It would amend one section of the current law to read, the term eligible beneficiary means any person, regardless of race, color, or national origin, whose land was acquired by the United States between 1898 and 1968, or descendants of such persons, or who occupied, farmed, or ranched land for residential or agricultural purposes for at least 1 year immediately prior to that land being acquired by the United States, except that a person is eligible if he or she occupied, farmed, or ranched land on or after December 8, and the land was acquired at any time after that date, etc. So, in other words, and then another section, to be eligible based on ownership of land that was acquired by the United States, a person must provide certain documentary evidence that he owned the land. So, in other words, the Chamorro Land Trust Act, as initially enacted back in 1975, said if you are Chamorro, then we will give you a lease for 99 years that you could either use for residence or for agricultural purposes. And there was kind of a hierarchy built into it. People that didn't have any other land were first priority. And people that owned other land still were eligible for that land trust land. Then, I think it was right after Rice versus Cayetano, we changed the definition of eligibility, and we said native inhabitants, people who gained United States citizenship solely by virtue of the enactment of the Organic Act, and their descendants, which, according to the Davis case, was just a proxy for race. It's the same thing as saying Chamorro, but in a little bit more camouflaged way. But now, this settlement here takes Chamorro completely out of it. And it says that the only people eligible for Chamorro Land Trust land are people or descendants of people who had land taken by the United States. So if you were living in, let's say you're from Humatak, the U.S. didn't take very much land in Humatak, you're not eligible for any Chamorro Land Trust land because you had to live on land that was taken by eminent domain by the United States between 1946 and 1968. This is a completely different idea than the Chamorro Land Trust as originally conceived by then Senator Paul Berdallo. And, the rap that always accompanied the Chamorro Land Trust was this. When that act was passed in 1975, nobody ever said, well, the reason we're doing this is because some people had their land taken by eminent domain and we want to make them whole. No one ever said that. The idea was we want Chamorros to have land on Guam, and we want to make sure that Chamorros always have land on Guam. That's why the 99-year lease instead of the conveyance in fee simple, because if you convey the land in fee simple, the person who takes the land could sell it, and he could sell it to anybody he wanted to. Wouldn't have to be a Chamorro. So that was the whole idea behind the Chamorro Land Trust and the Chamorro Land Trust Act. And it was no different as time progressed on. I've mentioned this before. When the Chamorro Land Trust Commission was moving very slowly on the leases, big surprise, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, I'd like to make a list of all of the good things that the Chamorro Land Trust Commission has done, at least that I'm aware of, in the last 30 years. I'd like to make that list. Real Joe Cruz, do you have a broken pencil there?
I do not, sir.
Okay, because I don't need a pencil with any lead in it.
I see.
To make this list. A broken pencil will work very, very well. Because they haven't done anything right. They have covered themselves with scandal. And I'm wondering if this is just another example. I wonder if they really know what they're doing here. Because they're really taking the Chamorro out of the Chamorro Land Trust. Now, some problems that I see here. This settlement sheet doesn't talk about the leases that have already been entered into. But if this becomes the law, then certainly there is a sound argument that the leases that were given to people based on the old rules, that they're of Chamorro ancestry or native inhabitants, and that they nor their ancestors never lived on land that was taken by eminent domain, then are those leases voidable, questionable? An interesting question. I would have thought that the first thing that the land trust folks would have done in their negotiation would have been to protect the leases that were already out there. And when this idea of settlement first came along, that was my advice. I said, if you guys are listening, you ought to try to sit down and settle. Because if you don't, if you go to trial and you lose, you might lose it all. You might lose the people who already have land, leasehold land, might lose those leases. So you really ought to consider that. But here we have their term sheet. It does not speak to people that already have leases. It doesn't speak to those who, although they don't have leases, have signed up and are somewhere in the queue for leases. So I don't know which is more problematic, this or Lou and her machinations with Bill 181. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission, of course, came out and took a victory lap when this came out and said, oh, yeah, we got a really good settlement here. We're going to be able to avoid that litigation. Now, in order for the settlement that was worked out between the Land Trust Commission and the justice folks, in order for that to fly, the legislature is going to have to amend the law along the lines set out here in the term sheet, what I've just been talking about. Now, let's take a short break, and we'll come back to the Chamorro Land Trust.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
The Sting, The Entertainer.
Yes, sir.
Good music, Real Joe Cruz. So that's what we've got here. And as I said, I don't know which is more screwed up, this or the whole Bill 181 showing off, grandstanding, etc. It's going to be very interesting to see how the legislature reacts when they get a note from the Chamorro Land Trust Commission saying, we can settle this case, but you've got to fundamentally change the Chamorro Land Trust Act. And I have a feeling that the nationalist tendencies of the members are going to come out and they're going to say, no, we're not going to do this. We want the Chamorro Land Trust Act to be for Chamorros. Let's go to court. And besides that, there's nothing discriminatory about it. I have to repeat that one, of course. So that's that item of the card. That's Lou versus, as you were, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission versus Chamorros. And the next item I have here is the IRS versus you. And I've got a question mark behind the you because I don't know if it applies to you or not. Jesse Limtiaco, of course, has to chime in here again. Here is a real interesting tidbit. Jesse says, at one point in time, the only people that were eligible to be governor were men from the U.S. Navy. This would have been during the naval administration from the end of the Spanish-American War to the Organic Act in 1950. You're absolutely right, Jesse. I kind of think I knew that. And if you really want to split hairs, there was, after the reoccupation of Guam, a Marine Corps lieutenant general was actually in charge of Guam. And of course, being a Marine Corps lieutenant general, he was not in the Navy. I'll look that up maybe and tell you what his name was on Monday. And then he goes on to say, forget the Chamorro Land Trust. Guam is an American territory. It belongs to America, not the Chamorro people. Guam is a possession, unincorporated. Well, who does California belong to, Jesse? It doesn't belong to California. It belongs to America. A very strange way of looking at things. And then Jesse says Guam is a possession, unincorporated. Well, Guam was a possession up until 1950. but it stopped being a possession in 1950 and became an unincorporated territory. And if you really like the word colony, that's when Guam became a colony, in 1950, not before that. But stay tuned, Jesse. I've heard a lot of people say that Tall Tales is always educational, so you've come to the right place. And Gus Castro Jasongas chimes in from Brownsville, Texas. I'm going to keep quiet today. I'm just very disappointed with the government and the individuals put into office to protect the interests of the people, putting aside political parties. Well, if you want to be quiet, it's okay, Gus. But as per the real Joe Cruz enjoinder, an active and informed citizenship is what's really necessary, right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so keep those Facebook comments coming, and if you have an empowering desire to hear your voice on our international radio audience network, it's 888-8255. I almost read my own phone number in there. Yeah, so there's an article in the December 23rd Mariana's Business Journal. Pretty interesting paper that I read every week or every 2 weeks, however often it comes out. And the title of the article is New IRS Campaign Aims to Collect Unpaid Self-Employment Taxes. Now, if you work for Choice Broadcasting, you get a chit that shows how much your wages were, how much was withheld for withholding tax, how much was withheld for Medicare tax, and how much was held for FICA, right, real Joe Cruz?
That's a personnel matter, sir.
Oh, that's right. You can't talk.
I can't talk.
You can't talk about it.
But yeah, allegedly, yes, sir.
You are the real Joe Cruz, though, right? Or is that a personnel matter?
I'm wearing his underwear.
Okay. So FICA, Federal Income Contributions Assessment. Okay, so that's the tax that people who have jobs pay in to the IRS. And it's what funds the Social Security Administration. And if you live long enough, you'll get some of that money back. But, if you die too soon, you aren't going to get any of that money back. You're told, it's a really good retirement program, but it's a tax. So if you are a wage earner or in the salariat, withholding, your employer must withhold the Social Security, the FICA item from your pay, and he pays an equal amount into that. He has to deposit it in a depository in a bank like every month, and the IRS keeps track of all of that money, and it shows up in the books of the Social Security Administration. Now, if you are not working for a company, if you're working for yourself, let's say I'm Bob the handyman. So your car won't start, you call Bob, and Bob comes over and he jumps your car and gets it started. And you say, hey, that was really good, Bob. How much do I owe you? And I say, $10. You give me $10, right? And then later on you say, hey, by the way, Bob, my toilet is I can't flush my toilet. Can you fix that? I go in and fix it, everything. How much is it? I got to get $20 for that. So we'll come back to Bob the handyman right after the big halftime show that we always have here in Tall Tales.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
This is a Fox News alert. A top Iranian general killed in Iraq. I'm Richard Jordan. The Pentagon says President Trump ordered the U.S. military strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Quds Force. Now, Iran's supreme leader warns a harsh retaliation is waiting.
Iraq State TV reporting that General Soleimani, the head of Iran's Quds Force, was killed at the airstrike several hours ago at Baghdad airport. Now, we know that this is coming specifically from Iraq State TV. The Associated Press also reporting 7 people killed by a missile fired at the airport. Now, the AP is quoting an Iran-backed paramilitary force, and the group is blaming the United States for this attack. It's not clear if this was a separate attack. Iraq State TV has also indicated there may be 2 separate attacks.
Fox's David Spunt. The Food and Drug Administration bans flavored e-cigarette products. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar says President Trump is taking action to combat the recent rise in vape-related lung illnesses.
Under the president's leadership, we've developed a smart, targeted policy that protects our kids without creating unnecessary disruption.
The Trump administration says menthol and tobacco-flavored products will remain on the shelves. Australia's summer wildfire season is the worst on record. More than 200 fires are burning, triggering one of the largest evacuations in the country's history.
At least 17 people have been killed. Smoke from these wildfires has made the air quality in the national capital, Canberra, the worst in the world on Thursday. More than 1,400 homes have been destroyed, and a 7-day state of emergency has now been called, giving authorities more control, more power to move people out.
Fox's Benjamin Hall. The Coast Guard ended the search for 5 fishermen missing after a crab boat sank off Alaska. 2 other crew members were rescued. Officials say the search was called off after 20 hours because it's unlikely the men survived. America's listening to Fox News.
Yikes, are those Christmas bills coming in already? Those high-interest credit cards at 16, 18, even 24%? Well, we have a New Year's solution for you. A Bank Pacific personal loan with rates as low as 4.65% to pay off those expensive credit cards. It's easy, it's fast, and it's as low as 4.65% APR.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal credit opportunity lender as low as 4.65%. Conditions apply.
It's hard to believe, but Security Title is 20 years old. Reaching this milestone is a clear testament to the hard work of our employees, who are as passionate about our work as we are about our community. We are most grateful for the realtors, lenders, attorneys, investors, and the buyers and sellers we serve. They are the reason our doors have been open for 20 years. Security Title looks back with gratitude for the past 20 years and looks forward with optimism to the next 20. Thank you, Guam.
A judge in Texas says a baby can be removed from life support despite the family's wishes.
Cook Children's Medical Center in Fort Worth says despite extraordinary measures to keep her alive, Tinsley Lewis should be allowed to pass away. The 11-month-old has a rare heart condition and chronic lung disease. A Texas appeals judge sided with the hospital. Attorney Joe Nixon, representing Tinsley's mother Trinity, says they are appealing. He blames a Texas law called the 10-day rule that gives families 10 days to find a new facility if they disagree with the doctor's plan of care.
It isn't even whether they're able to find a facility or not. The relevant portion is the fact that they get to take the right to make the decision away from you.
The family's working with a nonprofit group in an effort to find a new facility. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
One of 2 congregants killed in a Texas church was remembered Thursday night. Governor Greg Abbott was among those attending the funeral for 67-year-old Richard White, killed Sunday in White Settlement, Texas. U-Haul says smoking is a deal breaker for new employees.
The truck and trailer rental company will stop interviewing and hiring nicotine users, including those who use e-cigarettes and vaping products. The new nicotine-free policy is slated to take effect on February the 1st in more than 20 states where it is legal to do so. Some of those states include Arizona, where U-Haul is based, Florida, Georgia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Texas. U-Haul is making the move to ensure a healthier workforce. People hired before the new policy takes place won't be affected. U-Haul is not saying whether it will conduct tests. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
The son of the creator of the TV series Orange is the New Black died in a ski accident. Police say 20-year-old Charlie Noxon hit a sign while on a trail at Park City Mountain Resort in Utah. He had experience skiing and he was wearing a helmet. Noxon's mother is known for creating the popular Netflix show and the Showtime series Weeds. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, mom, dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So back to the adventures of Bob the Handyman. We're still talking about self-employment tax here. So Bob the Handyman does these odd jobs here and there, and people pay him for doing his work. He does not work for an employer who deducts FICA from his paycheck. So Bob's an upstanding citizen. He does a 1040 every year and pays his income tax. He files his gross receipts tax form, etc. That's all he needs to do, right? Wrong. Bob has income, and because Bob has income, he has to pay either self-employment tax or FICA. And since he's not working for an employer or for a company that deducts the FICA, Bob has to pay self-employment tax. Now, this is a little difficult here in the territories because if a person lived in the 50 states or the District of Columbia, when you do your 1040, there is a space on the 1040 where you enter the amount of your self-employment liability. It's a function of something that looks kind of like the profit from your business and applying that tax rate to it. What was it, 15.3%? So it's relatively easy to pay your self-employment tax when you live in the 50 states because it's on the 1040. Now, if you live in one of the territories, that isn't how it works because you don't pay your tax to the IRS, you pay your tax to the treasurer of Guam. So when you get to that part of your 1040, if you use TurboTax, you got to be really careful because you're going to wind up paying something you don't really owe. So when you get to TurboTax, that portion that deals with self-employment tax, you have to override because you can't pay your self-employment tax to the to the government of Guam. You have to pay it to the IRS. And the way you do that is that you go somewhere, you go on a website, and you get a Form 1040SS. And a 1040SS is a form that is used by people paying self-employment tax in the territories. So you fill that out, cut a check, put it in an envelope and mail it. I can't remember where you mail it, Philadelphia or someplace like that, and you have complied with the law, self-employment tax. So this article that I'm reading here says residents of U.S. territories with a self-employment income of $400 or more must pay the U.S. self-employment tax according to the IRS. The tax does not fall under Guam tax code, laid out in the Organic Act, and is therefore owed to the IRS under U.S. Code Chapter 2. Let's see. 6 months ago, the IRS announced its plans on its site to home and those who are erroneously claiming refundable tax credits. Those credits may include the Child Tax Credit or American Opportunity Tax Credit, etc. Let's see, that isn't the part I was looking for. Self-employed residents on Guam are subject to file a 1040, actually a 1040 SS, and pay self-employment tax. And this article goes on to point out that this enforcement effort is only taking place in the NMI, CNMI, Guam, Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I suppose that somebody out there is going to say, yeah, just like cockfighting, they're just picking on us. Well, not really, because the way we're being picked on here is we get to keep all of the what would be federal income tax. Anywhere else, we get to keep it ourselves and spend it ourselves. But the Treasurer of Guam does not collect the self-employment tax. That's why you'd have to do the 1040 SS. So if you have any questions about this, get a hold of somebody. Don't rely solely on H&R Klitzkie here, H&R Bob. But if you have self-employment income in excess of $400, you owe money to the IRS. Let's leave it at that. Next item on the card is Nelson versus Bloss. And this, of course, goes to the mayor of Jonia, who has been in the pokey since I think it's September 16, has not been able to function as a mayor of Jonia, except for filling out leave forms and drawing his annual leave every biweekly payday. So in the meantime, Jonia has no mayor, and there have been a couple of ideas kicked around. One citizen of Jonia says, I'm going to circulate a petition to recall the mayor of Jonia. But apparently that's tough going. And the reason it's kind of tough going, well, first of all, there are some people in Jonia who think that he's innocent until proven guilty. Yeah, well, with respect to the federal crimes he's charged with, okay. But what we're talking about here is him being guilty of not showing up for his duties as mayor of Jonia. He doesn't come to work. And then the other one is, well, you know, I know him, and, you know, kind of, I don't want to hurt his feelings and that sort of thing. Then another idea that was floated was to ask him to resign. You know, that would be kind of a public-spirited thing to do. You're the mayor of Jonia. You can't come to work. Your trial isn't scheduled until February. You may never be able to come to work. And even if you were to prevail in your trial and come back to work in February, people are still without a mayor for a long, long time. So why don't you do the honorable thing and resign? He hasn't resigned. One story in the paper said that he would exhaust his annual leave on December 23rd. And I just saw one recently that said he's got annual leave that'll take him to January 9. So, and I suppose the way things work, he's accruing annual leave all of this time because he hasn't resigned. Yeah. So now, Talina Nelson has kind of come up with, I think, a harebrained scheme to deal with this problem. And it's a story in today's Daily News. Another bill to try to address Jonia's leadership void has been introduced. Leadership void. And by the way, Daryl Taggarty, known to us all, called yesterday and said, maybe this is a good time to evaluate how is Jonia surviving without a mayor? If things are going along fine without a hitch, maybe we don't need mayors. Maybe we should just not fill that office and just do away with the idea of village mayors. An idea I've considered myself on more than one occasion for several reasons. One of which is that I don't have a good mayor right now. So, it's just costing a lot of money, and we're not getting, the folks in Jigo, we're not getting their money's worth. But here's the Talina Nelson idea. The measure would allow the governor to appoint a municipal planning council that in turn could appoint an acting mayor. Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, introduced Bill 260 on the same day. She wrote a letter, as you were introduced, Senator, let me read that again. Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes introduced Bill 260. On the same day, she wrote a letter to indicted Jonia Mayor Jesse Blas, asking him to consider stepping down so that the village residents can have a new leader. As of Thursday, the speaker said she had yet to hear from Blas regarding her letter, which she said was sent via Blas's attorney, Joseph Rosano. Earlier, one of Blas's family members told the mayor's council that the Jonia mayor asked for a draft resignation letter. And you may recall, I drafted sample language for Jesse Blas when that story broke. And let me see if I could probably do a pretty good depiction of it here. Here's what it would look like. I quit. That's all we need, Jesse. Your letter of resignation is probably not going to be sent off to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., or the Smithsonian Institution or something like that. Blas has been in federal detention since September. His September indictment on charges of bribery and extortion related to illegal drugs. A special election is required if the Jonia mayor's seat becomes vacant by March 8, or 240 days before the general election. After that, the Jonia Municipal Planning Council can install an acting mayor. But Blas is the only mayor not to appoint a municipal planning council. He was too busy assigning mailboxes. Apparently, he was too busy assigning mailboxes to set up a mayor's advisory council. I guess you opened the Tom line.
Yes, sir.
Hey, good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, Mr. American Jurisprudence. How are you?
Better than I deserve, Tom. Thank you.
Anyway, isn't the mayor's council under the executive department, a branch of our government?
Yes, it is.
And isn't the governor the boss of the executive department?
Well, she thinks so, yeah.
So why doesn't the governor order, by executive order that Mr. Sablan, the executive director of the Mayor's Council of Guam, to go up to Zonia and be the interim governor until election? That way we won't have to spend any money on recalls.
We're certainly spending enough money on Mr. Sablan, aren't we?
Exactly, yes. He's getting almost $200,000 a year.
100 grand.
Salary.
Yeah.
Because, Yeah, because the mayor's council already have the chairwoman there.
Well, you know, when it comes to vacancies, there's a gap filler at the beginning of Title IV that says if there's a vacancy in a government position and no other means to fill it, the governor could appoint. So based on that, the governor could appoint this mayor's council if that's seen to be important. But once again, if Sablon is able to go and function as the mayor of Jonia, do we really need an executive director of the mayor's council? I always ask the question, why do we even need a mayor's council? Because
that's right.
Because the mayors are supposed to, you know, they're local. They're supposed to function only in their village. And I don't see the wisdom in having them sit in a quasi-parliamentary body downtown running gambling and some of the other things that they do. I think maybe we should disband the mayor's council and let the mayors work in their villages.
That's a good thing that we ought to think about or doing. You know, we got to do that in the future. But in the meantime, let's send somebody up there to Sonia. That way we will not have to spend thousands of dollars on a recall election.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that man is not going to resign.
No, I guess not.
He wants to keep that money coming to his pocket.
Well, you know, actually, I wonder why he even has to take leave. Because, you know, as an elected official, he doesn't have to sign a time. Nobody has to approve his timesheet. He's just like a senator. If a senator wants to take off and spend the entire 2 years in East Jesus instead of going to session, who's to say anything about it?
That's right. We got to use this as a lesson learned to have a reform on this issue for future problems like this, you know.
For the next mayor that gets indicted.
Yep. And like you said, we got to get rid of the mayor's council. There's no need for it.
Okay, Tom. Right, thanks for chiming in. Same to you. Okay, so yeah, the money we're spending on the mayor's council and on mayors and the return we're getting from it, Daryl Taggarty makes a really good point. Be interesting to find out how Jonia was able to function without a mayor. My suspicion is probably just as well. Okay, so back to this article. Bloss is the only mayor not to appoint a municipal planning council, and I theorized probably too busy assigning mailboxes to spend any time appointing a mayor's planning council, a municipal planning council. Bill 260 seeks to allow the governor to appoint a member of the municipal planning council if the vacancy remains unfilled for 60 days. The governor's appointment of a municipal planning council would require the approval of the mayor's council by resolution with the advice and consent of the legislature. Now let's stop and see what Talina is proposing here. We don't have a mayor. We don't have a mayor's council. So she creates a mechanism for appointing a mayor's council. The governor appoints, but then the governor's appointment has to be approved by the mayor's council. What, co-equal branch there, Talina? The mayor's council is on an equal footing as the governor when it comes to executive appointments. And then if the mayor's council approves, then it has to go to the legislature for confirmation. And I know that a lot of our younger folks don't remember Rube Goldberg cartoons. Have you ever seen a Rube Goldberg cartoon, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
It's one of those things where he invents a machine. And the machine is so complicated, you know, that you start the machine by dropping bird seed in front of on a plate in front of a bird. The bird pecks at the bird seed. It causes a trap door to open. Water pours out. It causes a water wheel to spin. The water wheel generates an electric current. It causes a gate to on and on and on and on. You know, all of this to do something like give you a toothpick. That's a Rube Goldberg apparatus. And that's what Talina has invented here, a Rube Goldberg apparatus. We don't have a mayor, so this is how we fill the vacancy. A governor appoints a municipal planning council, and then the mayor's council confirms the municipal planning council. And if they confirm it, then it goes to the legislature, and the legislature confirms the municipal planning council, and then the municipal planning council appoints a mayor. So it would be, and of course my solution all along has been that the election commission can call for a special election when the office is vacant. And since Blas has been in jail since September 2nd, it doesn't take much of an imagination to conclude that the office is vacant. There's no one there that can come to work and do the work of the mayor, except for signing leave chits. So if we were concerned about the vacancy, then you could allow the governor to appoint a mayor. That makes sense. That would be an executive function. But to come up with this incredibly complicated Rube Goldberg device, we might not be able to get it all done by the time of the next election. Okay, then Talina just covers herself with glory in this story here. She goes on to say, I still believe that every man is innocent until they're proven guilty. I believe that every man is innocent until they're proven guilty. Good for Talina. She really understands pronouns. And by the way, my name is Bob. My pronouns are, hey, you, screw you, until they're proven guilty. Now, how many times do we go through this innocent? What is he guilty of, Talina? He's guilty of not coming to work as mayor. So is he innocent of that? Has he been coming to work? No, he hasn't been coming to work. That's it. And being indicted and in jail on criminal and pretrial detention is not a job protection plan, which is the way we seem to deal with it here. I still believe that every man is innocent until they're proven guilty. I just ask him. Now, she should have said, I just ask them to step aside so we can have the leadership ascertained during this process and have his case worked on. Have his case worked on. I'm sorry, this isn't Talina, this is Barnes. Excuse me, Talina. Barnes still believes that he's innocent until proven guilty. But until then, there have been a lot of concerns from the constituents in his village asking that he give up, step away from leadership until his case is adjudicated. No, Tina, you can't do that. He can't step away from his duties until his case is adjudicated. And I've explained this one before, especially with Mark Chotfris. Mark Chotfris was fired, and Mark Chotfris was charged with criminal charges arising from some of the same incidents that caused him to be charged criminally. Well, he got out from under his criminal charges on what everybody out there in our international radio listening audience is going to say is a technicality. It wasn't because the jury brought back a not guilty verdict. It's because the judge said there was prosecutorial misconduct. So he's out from under his criminal charges. Now he gets his job back, right? No, he doesn't get his job back. He has his appeal before the Civil Service Commission, and there's absolutely no reason for him to get his job back because the criminal charges went away. If a person is fired for acts that constitute a crime and he's prosecuted for the crime, found not guilty on the crime, that doesn't mean he gets his job back. Two different kinds of procedures, two different burdens of proof. In a criminal case, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence, even though the Civil Service Commission, clear and convincing evidence. So, Tina, I still believe that every man is innocent until they are proven guilty. It just goes on. And then she says, but then there have been a lot of concerns. And we're asking that he step away from the leadership until his case is adjudicated. Just can't do that. Vice Speaker Talina Nelson also introduced a bill seeking to initiate Blas's recall. If enacted, Bill 259 would mandate the Guam Election Commission to submit Jonia voters the question of whether Blas should be recalled. So, of course, there's enough blame to go around here, and part of the blame is this. You know, he was arrested and put in jail in pretrial detention in September. I think it was early October. He asked that his conditions of release be changed. In fact, he even asked that he go on house arrest so he could still be the mayor. And that was denied. That would have been a really good time for Talina Nelson to come forward with that recall bill. But it's time for the seventh inning stretch. I'll come back from the seventh inning stretch and finish this up.
Tis the season of wish lists, wreaths, and wrapping paper. Make this year a little more special by sprinkling the holidays with wonder. Apply today for a personal loan of up to $50,000 for as low as 4.75% annual percentage rate. Apply today at bankofguam.com or visit us at any one of our branches. Subject to Bank of Guam lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Wishing you a wondrous holiday season from Bank of Guam, the People's Bank, member FDIC.
The Points NFL Pick'em contest was a huge success. For the past several weeks, competitors have been giving their best guesses on weekly NFL football action, and it's been a lot of fun. Be sure and tune in Friday, January 10th, while we pretend to talk about sports for the grand prize winner reveal. The winner will be in studio to pick their choice of a brand new phone from GTA. Many thanks to all who participated in the contest, and especially to our sponsors, Current Guam and GTA.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Try their featured special for January. SD-styled fish tacos, beer-battered tender fish fillets, stuffed in corn tortillas and topped with cilantro, lime, sour cream sauce, shredded cabbage, and salsa fresca, served with a spicy roasted chili salsa for only $12.95. Try it today. Available in Agana and in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
There we are, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago. Seventh inning stretch. That means we've got just two more innings of Tall Tales today. And I'm just wrapping up here with Tina and Talina fumbling through the problem of no mayor in Jonia. And what a couple of could have happens. First of all, the election commission could have called a special election and declared that the office was vacant when it became apparent that there would not be any pretrial release for Mayor Blas. Second thing that could have happened was that Talina could have introduced a recall bill way back in October instead of waiting until now. So everybody waited so long that now we're in a time crunch, because if we go beyond the day in March, there could be no election under the current state of the law. So I've offered a couple of suggestions and some scathing criticism, I suppose, of the way the legislature has not handled this. And that, that's what the legislature is for. A legislature is there not to just do the usual routine stuff, the resolutions and the cookie pushing and stuff like that. It's supposed to be there to deal with the unforeseen and the emergent. And that's what we had here. Nobody dealt with it. I think the most telling statement came from Pito Terlahi, whose legislative committee has jurisdiction over the mayors. When a reporter asked him, well, are you going to go for a recall? He said, I've got to see what the consensus of the members is. Well, consensus of the members. If you have 15 members in a body, that means all 15 agree on doing the same thing. Consensus does not mean 8-7. Consensus means everybody. That's what a consensus is. Now, maybe that isn't what he meant. Maybe what he meant to say was, I want to see what the thought, what some of the some of the members see this. But that should have been his top, his top priority task, to check and find out if there was any support for a recall measure, and if there were, introduce that recall legislation to get the matter moving. And if the recall measure came to the floor and it failed, well, he did his job. But so far, he's done nothing. He's a committee chair who has done nothing except let the people in Jonia, which is his village, let them suffer along without a mayor. So, of course, I have a speculation license here. I'm permitted to speculate on political matters, and my speculation is this, that legislators, being courageous as they are all sitting there saying, I don't know if I want to go with this recall thing or not, because, some of the voters in Jonia might be angry at me if I support recall of Jesse, because he's their cuñado, or he's their friend, or parentis, or compadre, or something like that. So I don't know. Better to let Jonia not have a mayor at all than for me to run the risk of alienating, a few voters out there in Jonia. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to alienate voters. I'm here to pander and please. Because in my mind, that's how I get reelected. So I suspect that until Nelson finally came along, and Nelson has shown on past occasions that she's got a little bit more intestinal fortitude than the other folks down there. Now, of course, if I were a sexist, I'd say, well, with 10 women in there, what do you expect? Who's going to be gutsy down there? And it turns out that Talina Nelson is the only one gutsy enough to come forward with his recall measure. So this is not good government, to have a government official in jail on pretrial detention on serious federal charges, and our government and our legislative branch and our executive branch do absolutely nothing up until now. Okay, so that's so much for the mayor. It's been a kind of a light week this week as far as controversy is concerned. New Year's holiday, Christmas, and everything like that. So I'm down to the bottom of the calendar, and the bottom of the calendar is something that's been here before. It's called Gramsci versus you. It's the cultural Marxist attack on Western society. This is very, very important. It gets into things like philosophy and government and things like that. And it's easy to think, well, that only applies on the mainland. It doesn't apply here. But I'm going to tell you that it does apply here, that cultural Marxism is alive and well on Guam. And it presents itself as the separatist movement. And I'm I'm hoping that that'll become a little bit more apparent after I go through some of this article here. Now, I've started this before. You may not have been listening, so I'm going to restart it, but it starts like this. It's the title of the article from the Washington Times is called "The Cultural Marxist Attack on Western Society," and it's by a guy named James Veltmeyer, who is a physician in La Jolla, California. Not a politician, he's a doctor. And this is what he says. Have you ever heard of Antonio Gramsci? And if you go to Google and ask for the pronunciation, it comes out like this, Gramsci. Have you ever heard of Antonio Gramsci? How about Herbert Marcuse or the Frankfurt School? These names are probably meaningless to all but a small minority of scholars, academics, and political theorists throughout the world, and talk show hosts too. Because I became aware of this cultural Marxism, or cultural Marxism, or is also referred to as neo-Marxism, quite some time ago. Yet Americans, indeed all those who treasure the religion, culture, and history of Western civilization, should become acquainted with these names if they are to understand the forces that are currently tearing society apart. Marxism appeared on the scene in Europe in the mid-19th century. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels posited a thesis that capitalist society was doomed to demise as the, quote, proletariat, the working class, rose up to overthrow their oppressors, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, or property owners. Marx and Engels saw world history through the prism of a perpetual class struggle between these two implacable enemies. Marx predicted that socialist revolutions would spring up throughout the West as the proletariat overthrew the bourgeoisie and established dictatorships in the name of the people. Fortunately for us, but unfortunately for Marx, his prediction fell short. The socialist revolutions largely failed to materialize in Europe or America. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 arrived in Russia, vanguard of the East, and had as much to do with the tragic casualties and deprivations of World War I as anything to do with the wealth of the property classes. Subsequent communist revolutions that attempted to replicate what Lenin achieved in Russia, be they in post-war Hungary under Bela Kun or Germany under Rosa Luxemburg, were either short-lived or failed altogether. So point up to this point is that the great socialist communist revolution succeeded in Russia. And something that I always point out is that Marx said that the workers of the world would unite, that the workers of the world had much more in common with one another than they had with the middle class. So workers would unite to overthrow the middle class. Well, when World War I broke out, it became readily apparent that German workers and French workers could kill each other with carefree abandon, and the same for Russian workers. So that theory really didn't hold up very well during wartime when worker fought worker. Aside from Mao's communist takeover of mainland China in 1949, which again happened in the East, not the West, and again on the heels of a major destructive world war, most communist successes in the post-World War II era occurred not as the result of a spontaneous uprising of the proletariat, but at the point of a bayonet. Communist regimes were forcibly imposed by Moscow on most of Central and Eastern Europe as an iron curtain darkened the continent for the next 40 years. And I suppose TV buffs have seen the famous speech by Winston Churchill. His what was the name of that place in Missouri where he gave his famous speech from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic? A vast iron curtain has descended across Europe. So I got Michael on the line, huh? Michael, what can
Bob.
Hi, Michael. What can you tell me about cultural Marxism?
Yeah, it's an area that I'm really fascinated by. Two areas. One is how Marx got everything wrong. His prediction was this: as the society becomes richer and richer, the distance between the poorest groups and the upper groups are going to grow and grow because money is going to flow to the capitalists and the workers are going to fight among themselves. So his prediction was the modern societies such as Germany and England and even the United States, though the United States really didn't count because everybody's looking at England and Germany as the leaders of the world, industrial world. So his prediction was communism would rise up there because of disparity of the income. And instead, it rose up in places where everybody was poor, where basically everything broke down. It broke out in the poorest of the European countries, Russia. And that's just yet another example why Marxism is thoroughly discredited. His entire theory was wrong, his prediction. Now, Marx was actually a historian who was he wrote several books. Das Kapital was just there's a thesis. And the last one is what we're looking at is his evolution on how the people are going to rise up and redistribute wealth, which, ironically actually goes back to feudal times. The other area that I'm fascinated by is the Frankfurt School. Of course, I'm very familiar with the fascists you mentioned earlier. They all were part of the Mussolini group in Italy, and they wrote a lot of theories of fascism, which is merely nothing more than the grandfather, the godfather of socialism. And so Mussolini and then, of course, his disciple Hitler were all avowed fascists, but in fact, all socialists are actually fascists, if you understand the real definition of fascism. The Frankfurt School is fascinating because it was founded by Jewish fancy pants. We'd call them trust fund kids. These are guys, this kid founded the Frankfurt School. He was from Argentina. He was a German Jew. A lot of Germans were in Argentina. And this is the fascinating part. He moves to Frankfurt or to Germany, funded by his dad's wealth. He falls in love with Marx and starts to promote it. And it's called the Frankfurt School because he's out of Frankfurt, Germany. And he tracked, and with his dad's money, he funded some seats and, subsidized the school thought of trying to promote Marxism. The problem he ran into was Hitler was also himself a socialist like him. And the thing about socialists that's really fascinating is you can never have two socialists in the same room because each one wants to be the totalitarian dictator of the other. And so it's like having two male pit bulls in the same cage. One of them has to be the dominant one, the other one has to be servants. And that's why socialism, whenever they try to mix with other socialists, inevitably always get into a big fight over who's the main dog, because in socialism, it's all about being the very top of the market, and you get that through government power. So Hitler chased the Frankfurt School out. They moved briefly, right before the outbreak of World War II, this is 1930s, they moved briefly to Switzerland, and then eventually they relocated, and this is where it impacts America. They relocated to freaking Columbia University in New York City. And that's where they started the Frankfurt School in America. And from there, their disciples spread up to the Ivies, Yale and Harvard and those people. And then they jumped all the way over to UCLA. And then from UCLA, they eventually spread northward up to Berkeley. And it's those disciples. Most of your teaching in these schools came from this transplant of the Frankfurt School after the end of World War II. It actually moved back to Germany, but they left behind this legacy, which eventually contaminated all of American education. It's just really an amazing story, and that a lot of people don't realize the huge impact that this philosophy has had. So I'm so happy you're bringing this up. I wish more people were aware that a lot of their ideas that they think are new and progressive are really recycled ideas out of failed historians who got everything wrong.
True enough, Michael. And
that's all I had to say.
Yeah, well, you had a mouthful there. I'm glad you called in. Thank you. So,
Background.
So the Frankfurt School was actually called the Institute of Social Research, and Columbia actually cut a deal. They needed social research, so they brought these guys over who were Jews escaping from Hitler. Okay, so we got. We're going to head down. I'm going to take. Antonio Gramsci down the home. I'm going to ride him to the finish line here. So we got the home stretch coming up, and I got a caller on line 1. That would be our Carl.
Hi, welcome to this ad for new Subway sliders, starting at $1.99 each. How do you want it?
Cheer Squad. Woo! Go Subway sliders, starting at $1.99 each. Woo! Give me a ham and jack slider.
Ham and jack slider.
Give me an Italian spice slider.
Italian spice slider.
What's that spell?
It doesn't really spell anything.
New Subway sliders, starting at $1.99 each. Go sliders!
Subway, make it what you want.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so here we are at Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. You just saw the horses herded into the starting gate there, and you heard the call to the post. So we're heading down the home stretch in Tall Tales this afternoon. I'm going to let our Carl have a mount and ride all the way to the home stretch if he can stay in the saddle that long.
Yeah, I appreciated Michael's comments. He is more, I think, deeply versed in the history of the Frankfurt School. But I think it's very, very important. You know, the temptation for people that are listening to think, well, you know, big deal, that has to do back there in mainland academia. You know, what's that have to do with Guam? But actually, it has a great deal to do with Guam. You know, there early 2018, it might have been January, there's this study group called FANACHU, F-A-N-A-C-H-U, and if you type that into Google and you type in Antonio Gramsci, G-R-A-M-C-S-C-I, that will pop up. There was a study session held in Agana where they were talking about the ideas of Antonio Gramsci and discussing his most famous work, his prison notebooks. And Gramsci was, I think, one of the earliest ones to try and salvage Marxism because it was progressively becoming evident, especially after World War I and II, that his theories, his prophecies, he was not a scientist, he was a prophet. He tried to predict what was going to happen. His prophecies were falling apart. So Gramsci was one of the earliest ones to try to move the movement away from bloody revolution and toward the direction of infiltrating the institutions of society, Western industrialized society specifically, in order to cause them to implode on themselves. And there's a quote I have from that meeting that happened, I believe it was early January, and I think it's very telling because it seems to get at the heart of what the intention is. One of the people at this meeting said, so what we need to do is we need to take over the ways that people produce their values and their understanding of the world, and then we can get them to join our side. And so they're discussing Gramsci to try to incorporate some of his philosophies and his strategies and ideas on invading these these institutions, such as the media, such as academia, such as Hollywood, such as Washington, D.C. on the left, that we see happening now. And there's a particularly helpful quote by Gramsci. I think it goes to the heart of what his ideas are. And I'm not an expert on Gramsci, but I believe at this point that I think this goes to the heart of what he was trying to bring out. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. And I believe this was in the early part of the first half of the 20th century. So he was very, he had great foresight. And his ideas and strategies, Gramsci's ideas, have been tremendously successful. They're in our media, they're in Hollywood, they're in academia, they're in our schools, our universities. Schools it's going down as early as elementary school now, with the idea of the gender issue. And another quote from that meeting, one of the speakers there, in this discussion, says that one of the Italians or the mercenary forces that we haven't tapped into, I think, is the LGBT community and LGBT struggles, and we need to find ways to connect with those, to what we do more. And, that's classic intersectionality, finding all these victim groups that feel and helping them to feel oppressed, and then uniting them where their interests intersect. That's why they call it intersectionality. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. I appreciated Michael's comments and his history. I didn't know a lot of that. But we can't ignore this. This is really affecting the mainland a great deal, and it's out here. This...
Do you have, Carl, do you have a name from that group that was studying Gramsci, the Fanatsu?
Well, it says at the beginning that this, one of the people speaking at the very first part of it says, Hafa de Independentistas. So this is from the group that wants to separate from America, and they're studying strategies and ways to incorporate these early leftist strategies and incorporating them into Guam's situation. Our institutions here, our schools, our media, churches. I don't know if that's what you meant, but anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant, because I said that, it's easy to say, well, that's over in the mainland, but doesn't have any effect here. But it does, because this independentista group obviously embraces the whole Gramsci Frankfurt School idea about overcoming institutions, and that quote you read about how socialism must become the religion. It looks like that's exactly what's going on here.
And it's not surprising that a lot of the leadership, the core leadership of this movement to try and separate from the United States are academics and have had their ideas, greatly influenced by the left, especially in the humanities and the social sciences, what they call the soft sciences, in mainland colleges. And now these ideas are being brought here and being spread among, especially the Chamorros. So I'm glad you're raising awareness about that. I think it's critically important to the future of Guam.
I do too, Carl. We're running out of time today, but I will bring this back on Monday. There's some good stuff in this article that I have, and I will keep hammering away at this because I do think it's extremely important. I thank you for your call.
Yeah, I've got the title down, and we'll look that up. It sounds really excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. So here we are. The real Joe Cruz and I are we're gonna be playing hooky for a couple days, but we're gonna be back on Monday. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.